Take your Bibles, please, and turn to Leviticus. We're in the study of the Old Testament where Gentiles are trying to understand the Jews, and that stretches your mind, and you say, what's the use? I'm a Christian. But one of the things we see from Leviticus is to look at the sacrifices, and we have a broader view from our standpoint that Jesus Christ fulfilled the various thought processes in God's mind when he gave those particular laws about the burnt offering, the idea it's a whole burnt offering, total dedication unto God. Jesus did that. When it was dealing with the meal and peace offerings, there would be the fellowship aspect where the priest would get his, and especially the peace offerings when paying a vow. The person who's offering the vow would partake of that, which would not happen in other places and other times. But that's the fellowship. We're having fellowship with God. I turned it on, I turned it off. Thank you. And we're striving to understand that aspect of it. Well, through Jesus Christ's death, and we have fellowship with God. We're sanctified by his blood and have fellowship with him. The sin offering and trespass offering, which we get into in chapter 4, beginning here, is dealing with the idea of sin and trespass. These are not voluntary because what has happened? We've sinned. And therefore we have to put into place the offering for our sin. We can't just, well, if I have a good Thanksgiving heart this week, I'll offer my burnt offering or my Thanksgiving offering, that sort of thing. So we're looking at these chapters here dealing with what was mandatory, especially with sin and trespass. And that's a fine line. How are you going to divide that? You may not like the way I outlined it. You may think when I was talking about trespass offerings, it's still talking about sin offerings. You have a very good point. But I looked at it as looking at trespass offering, emphasizing the transgression. That's why we're looking at sin. But also including the fact that we've done something wrong to somebody else. And therefore, you add a 20% penalty when you pay back what you owe, because you've wronged them. That was part of the law. So we may get into that fine line. It's still talking about sin offering. I'll show you, well, it's still talking about trespass offering too. But you have a point, because it could be at in the middle of chapter 5 instead of the first part of chapter 5. We definitely get into trespass offerings. And I will show both sides of that as we get there. But one of the things we established last time was the unwittingly sinning, meaning I didn't mean to do that in the sense it was carelessness on my part. It was something that was not done, as Numbers 15:30 says, with a high hand. Verse 29, it says if you do it unwittingly, you can offer the sacrifice, but he that does it with a high hand, God's not going to accept that sacrifice. High-handed is the idea that you don't care about the law. Instead, well, I do care about the law, but I didn't know that law. I did it in ignorance. I did it out of passion. That's not the way I usually act, but I acted that way. I lied when I didn't mean to. That's unwittingly. I even did something wrong to my neighbor. I was forced to because I needed something real badly. And there's a sense of that inadvertent type of sinning, even to the point of one's passions where you will make a rash vow. You can get forgiveness of those things. There was the offering of that sacrifice. That's why in Hebrews 10, when it says, if you sin willfully after you have the knowledge of the truth, it's the context of don't turn your back upon Jesus. And when you've done that, you've done despite unto the Spirit of grace. You trod underfoot the Son of God. Just because I missed services? They're missing services because of that attitude that they had, that Jesus was no longer important to them. And therefore, he said, there's no more sacrifice for sins. Literally, that's true. Jesus is the only one. But in the Old Testament, literally, that's true. There'll be no sacrifice. When you have that knowledge of the truth, you don't care about that. You did it on your own. So I think we'll see in these chapters 4 through 6, we'll be able to see what unwittingly means and to see what sins we're talking about. And in fact, we're forced to in this lesson as well. So knowing that, we now come into chapter 4 in dealing with the priest who sins, dealing with the whole congregation who sins, dealing with the ruler who sins, and dealing with the common man, dealing with the individual who sins. Here we look at chapter 4. He sinned unwittingly. So if it's without knowledge and something needs to be brought to his attention that he did something rashly and that sort of thing, when he found out that, after he knew about his sin, he would offer the sacrifice. For example, let's talk about the common man. Chapter 4 and verse 27. If any one of the common people, not the ruler, not the high priest, that sort of thing, or the whole congregation, if any one of the common people sin unwittingly, inadvertently, so forth, in doing any of the things which Jehovah had commanded not to be done, and be guilty, it is his sin which he has sinned. If his sin which he has sinned be made known unto him, then he shall bring an oblation, a goat, a female without blemish, for the sin which he has sinned. Is ignorance bliss with God? Or, well, you didn't sin when you're ignorant. No. Ignorance is not going to get you off the hook with sin. You did sin. But then when you make it known, that's when we offer our sacrifices unto God. The psalmist speaks about keep me from secret sins. And I want to know the sins within me that are secret. Keep me from presumptuous sins. There's the high-handedness. But I need to deal my heart and keep me from those. I need to understand myself. And sometimes I don't know enough. Sometimes I'm not in control enough. Sometimes I just forget about this because something else is more important and I sin. And that's what we're speaking about. So here was the idea, oh, God, forgive me if I've done sin today. He doesn't forgive until you confess, until you repent. All the secret sins God's going to take away. He's never done that in the old law. And what do you do in the new law, and under the new law? If I have sinned today, forgive me. If I want to be praying, God, if I have sinned, let me know it. And therefore, he'll see how earnest I am, because when we study my Bible, looking into the mirror of God and seeing how I ought to be, my knowledge is going to increase, so I won't be doing things out of ignorance. I want to avoid those sins. And I don't want to have a high hand, but the more I know, the more I appreciate, the more I'm growing in the Lord. And I think it's instructive. They didn't offer a sacrifice until they knew about their sin, even though they did it in ignorance. And I think we need to fine-tune how we look at secret sins, sins that we don't know about yet, as if God took care of all of that. I want to be praying, God, if I have sinned that I don't know about, please let me know. Somehow let me know so I can change my life and repent to be better. That's what we find happening in the Bible. So with those thoughts in mind, question number one: what two situations can be seen in sinning unwittingly? Inadvertent action, carelessness, or I don't know, ignorance. I didn't know that. If I do it, I forgot it. I lost my head. I did it inadvertently. I gave in to temptations, rash actions, so forth. But inadvertently, it's not my way of life. I hate that. Now I know what it is. I'm going to offer the sacrifice unto God. But there would be those two things. And then you can look at it and you can filter that into three areas. The idea of carelessness, misunderstanding the law, not just ignorance. I just applied it wrong. I was ignorant at how to apply the truth. And you find that out because the contradiction you have, you say, I don't want to have a contradiction with truth, so you back off and you change your position. And so there may be not just ignorance of the law, but misapplication of the law that we might have. And then the sudden passion that sometimes comes in sin, that we will see. Something suddenly happens, the circumstances are so great that you do something quickly without thinking. I wasn't thinking, because your passions are ruling over you. And so sometimes there's our human condition, and we find that possibility to take place. Before we get into verse by verse, I took all of the sins that we see here being talked about in these chapters, and asked, since these things were to be given a sacrifice done unwittingly, my question is, how would the following sins be done unwittingly? Number one, not bearing witness when I'm called as a witness under oath. Touching an unclean thing. Swearing rashly. Chapter 5, verse 4, we say, cheating neighbor out of money. Did that unwittingly? Oppressing the neighbor. Swearing to a lie. You see that in chapter 6. And so, I'd like to spend a moment here. I make an application. So in chapter 5 and verse 1, if anyone sin in that he heareth the voice of adjuration. How does one hear the voice of adjuration, which is an oath? All right, let me give you an example from Jesus' day. Pilate said, I adjure you, are you the Son of God? He put Jesus under oath. Jesus heard an oath. And what did he say? Are you the Christ? He said, you say well. He spoke. This person is under that same pressure. And he doesn't answer. Or he doesn't answer fully. Or he leaves out important information. And maybe the pressure is, that's a friend. And what I'm about to say is going to be something held against him. I'll just hide all the bad parts. You're under oath. You're a witness to these things that have happened. And what you do, you back off of that. You don't do that. Look at Proverbs 29. Some of the Proverbs to see these events that can take place in especially the lives of the people who were brought under an oath. He says, who is a partner with a thief hateth his own soul. That's one side. And now the other side of it, he heareth the adjuration and uttereth nothing. Here I've got a thief and I'm a partner with him and I hate my soul. Why? Because what happens to accomplices? I just drove the car. He robbed the bank. I wasn't going to kill anybody in there. They killed him. You're an accomplice. Can you get the death penalty too? Maybe not now, but you used to. You may get out on bond. Cheap bond. That's how upside down our world is. But the sense is that, well, I am an accomplice to this. And so here I am, I'm going to be an accomplice to what's going to happen to my friend maybe, or something that's going to happen to somebody that I care about, so I don't say all the truth. I don't speak when I ought to speak. I've been brought under an oath because I could be a good witness for justice. And the pressure, it causes me, I don't usually lie. But that was a family member. That was somebody close to me. And I will not speak. I can see one doing that unwittingly. Touching an unclean thing. There's so many laws about what was unclean. And yet that we're seeing that in Leviticus. If anyone touch any unclean thing, whether it be a carcass or an unclean beast, or a carcass of unclean cattle, or the carcass of creeping things, and it be hidden from him, and he be unclean, then he shall be guilty. He'll be ceremoniously unclean. They were to touch a dead animal, they would be unclean, ceremonially unclean until the rest of the day. They go through the process of washing and all of that sort of thing. But you might not know something is dead, and you touched it, and you did that unwittingly. And whether it be an unclean animal or one that's dead, you come across a carcass. What if you touched a body of a person? You were unclean, a dead body. And so there's a sense, I can see one doing that inadvertently. Maybe touch the dead body of my wife or my husband or my mother or my father. You weren't thinking. Carelessness. Unwittingly, I can see that happening. I just stop there. Are you with me, or you say, I don't understand? Give me a nod, one way or the other. Swearing rashly. Swearing rashly. You're not to swear and make an oath unless you're going to do what? Going to fulfill it. Jephthah realized that. Ecclesiastes teaches us that. And so you made a promise before God, and your yea, as we see in the New Testament, should be yea, and that sort of thing. And therefore, you ought to be able to understand that this is something you're going to have to fulfill. But you did that rashly. You know better than that. I just wasn't thinking. Because I'm certain about this. I'm going to do this. And a lot of times that can happen in our lives. How many times have you said, well, we'll be there next week, and you find next week your wife has already got you something all lined up. You didn't know that. You spoke off the top of your head without checking with the boss. And you have to back off. And then people say, well, I guess I can't trust you. Well, I did that rashly. I should have be thinking. I didn't know it was spring break. Things change. I just wasn't aware of it. Unwittingly. Swearing rashly. The Bible's saying that. So we've got to figure out, how could that be? Cheating a neighbor out of money. How do you do that unwittingly? But that's what we see taking place. Chapter 6 and verse 1, Jehovah spake unto Moses, if anyone sin, commit a trespass against Jehovah, and deal falsely with his neighbor, in a matter of deposit or a bargain or robbery, or have oppressed his neighbor. So, robbery? How do you rob a brother unwittingly? Now, I don't want to know so I can do it. How do you do that? And nobody knew, not even you. I've got friends coming. I don't have bread in my house. I don't have a lamb. I don't have sheep. I may go to the man who only has one sheep. Take it from him. Take it from him. Rob him. I don't usually do that, but I've got company coming. I've got pressures. I've got things upon me that I may cheat my neighbor out of money or idea of even robbing him to the point of oppressing my neighbor, doing him harm in order to get it. And you realize that wasn't right to do that. And yet it's kind of hard for us to think in terms of that, but that's what we see taking place with these examples that we see. When he says a matter of deposit or a bargain or robbery, what would be a matter of deposit? I'll leave my cat with you this week. I'm depositing my cat for you to take care of. Or my dog, my parakeet, what have you. And they like it so much they keep it. I robbed them. I just don't ever have a way to get it back to you. And I'm not available for you to come get it. You know, something of that sort. That indeed that would be happening. What about a pledge in deposit? I give you a pledge that I will pay my bill and I'll let you have my outer warmer coat, and that would be my pledge, but I need it by nightfall, and you don't give it to them. Deposit, forced robbery. I've oppressed my neighbor, because under the system that we lived under as Jews would be the fact that you were not to keep that overnight. You were not to keep that overnight, but give it back to the poor man. He deposited with you as a guarantee he'd pay you money. And the wages at the end of the day, maybe he paid it and you kept it from him. Those things are brought together, a matter of deposit or bargain or robbery, or have oppressed his neighbor, bringing harm to him because of that. Or you found that which is lost. And we talk about his swearing to a lie. How do you do that? That when people would find things, they'd find a cow out in the road somewhere, they found an animal, they found a piece of garment, they could pick that up, and this was lost and found, and they were to take that back to their house. You read through the law of Numbers, places like that give some details about that. And you keep it there. And here comes a neighbor coming, said, Did you happen to find my cat? Did you happen to find my dog? Did you happen to find my cow, my ox out here? And what do? You swear to a lie. You say no. Why? Because I want that so badly. You don't normally do that. And that's what could happen. That's unwittingly. Didn't mean I'm not thinking in the sense of this is what I planned to do in the first place. But things change when maybe you like that item so much. And they've delayed their coming so long, they may not really miss it. And you begin to work, not what you deliberately did when you found the animal, but now passion and carelessness and not thinking through, you allow things to control your action that you will swear to a lie. And you're guilty. If any of these things that a man doeth sinneth therein, then it shall be he has sinned and is guilty. He shall restore that which he took by robbery. He stole that oxen. And when that's brought to your attention, maybe the man comes, and you know, in the Old Testament, we see here in these first 5 books of the law, that God would determine who's telling the truth a lot of times. If a man was jealous because he thought his wife was cheating, God would take care of that, because she'd be drinking water, and if she was innocent, it wouldn't hurt her, but if she was guilty, it would kill her. Then you know she's lying. That's how harsh God dealt with that. But during the times in which these elders and the judges would judge, we don't know. He says it's his oxen. You say it's us. Let God determine this. And when God determines that and finds out who the guilty one, trespass offering kicks in here in chapter 6. They were to pay 20 cents more than what that ox was worth. That's your trespass offering. You wronged somebody. And what we see here in chapter 5, verse 1, if anyone sin, can you see what that might be called? Still sin offerings that they were to offer, in the sense that they would, verse 6, but verse 6 says, he shall bring his trespass offering. That's why I put it in here as trespass offering. But verse 5 says he shall confess that wherein he has sinned. He shall confess where he sinned, and offer his trespass offering unto Jehovah. And yet in verse 9, at the base of the altar, it is a sin offering when he offers his offering. And then we definitely know in verse 14, and Jehovah spake unto Moses, saying, if anyone commit a trespass and sin unwittingly in the holy thing of Jehovah, then he shall bring his trespass offering unto Jehovah, a ram without blemish. Every time they would offer a sacrifice, it would not be a goat, it would not be a ox, it would be a ram in connection with trespass offerings. And you got sin offering, burnt offering connected still with chapter 5, leading up to verse 14. Another indication that says maybe these first 13 verses are still sin offerings, even though it says trespass offering, maybe sin offering, because look how our Bible defines when he moves to another subject. Notice when we see chapter 1 and verse 1, Jehovah called Moses and spake unto him. And so we go through the first 3 chapters and we see, well, okay, he dealt with that. Then what do we see here at the beginning of chapter 4? And Jehovah spake unto Moses, saying, he's making a move now. We're now going into the sin offerings, the sin offerings and the trespass offerings, or the trespass offerings and the sin offerings. Well, how does he open verse 14? At the end of chapter 4 and right in the beginning of chapter 5, if anyone sin, he's still talking about sin offerings maybe. And then verse 14, Jehovah spake unto Moses, saying, if you commit a what? Trespass. You definitely know that trespass offerings is now talked about beginning with verse 14. The question is, just because trespass offering is set in the first 13 verses, does that mean it is a trespass offering? But see, these are specific sins one does. And my relationship with God, I swear falsely, I touch an unclean thing, I'm ceremoniously unclean. I did not say anything when I was called as a witness. I'm named for God. That could hurt somebody else. So there's a fine line when you say, well, trespass offerings, that was my injury to someone else. That's why I had to pay restitution. And the sin offerings was primarily my relationship with God. And therefore, I would have to offer a female from the flock. Verse 5, Jehovah for sin and has sinned, a female from the flock, a lamb or a goat for a sin offering. That's chapter 5 and verse 4. And my outline here is I still got it as trespass offerings. And the way I wrestle with that, since it's talked about trespass offering, here was the trespass offering emphasizing specific sins, which definitely in verse 14 will become sins affecting my neighbor, where I pay restitution. I don't offer a female goat. I offer a ram, and it's always a ram. And so I have described this emphasizing the transgression. It's still a sin, but I'm emphasizing the transgression, and that's where he's a trespass. These can lead into when I'm not swearing as I should. I could be affecting other people. And so I think it goes that line too, but especially trespass offerings, you're going to have restitution, and you offer a ram. That would be distinctive from what we see in the sin offering. So in one way, I can see verses 1 through 13 in chapter 5 still opening up for us the sin offerings that we're dealing with. And the trespass offerings takes place there in verse 14. But I have them all emphasizing the transgression from 5:1 to 6:7. So that's where I'm coming from. We're looking at the trespass offerings and then specific sins, and also then definitely how the trespass offering would come. It makes it distinguishable from sin offerings. You pay restitution. That's how I get it in my mind. Is any questions or comments about that? Yes, sir.
So some of your examples, I don't quite see it that way. can see how you can touch an unclean thing by accident, but to go and take someone else's lamb, you're aware of that.
Then you're on the wrong line. I said passion overcomes our reasoning.
I understand. Can I finish? So what I'm saying is, if
thought
you
you-
have a transaction where you buy, let's say you buy 100 head of cattle from someone, and you tell your servants to go take care of it, and your servants take 110, and you're unaware of it. Your intention is to buy 100 head of cattle, and something happens where you can have 110 instead of 100, and you become aware of it. Your intention is not to cheat your neighbor.
I don't think it was in these cases either. I tried to explain that. Passion overrides it
But
sometimes.
when you're aware of it and you try and hide it,
I'm not saying that. That's not what they did. They become aware of that. I'm trying to tell you what was the impulse that did it in the first place, because they don't normally do that. They don't normally cheat their neighbor. You don't normally lie, but they swore to a lie unwittingly. I need to find out what that means. And I'm with you. If you're thinking, I did that premeditated, that's my plan, and that's not unwittingly. That'd be more of your high-handedness. But here is that it happened. And my question is, I want to know why it happened. How could it be unwittingly? I feel the same way with you. How did that ever happen?
but is it possible that you don't have all the facts and you make a
Sure.
or you swear about something and then you become aware?
That's another illustration. That's true. I'd be right with it. That's what we're talking about. There's a lot of things there about robbing a person. You know that's not yours. Why did you want it? Because I got company. I'll deal with that later. And it's the pressure of that. I think that's the thing. Otherwise, I agree with you. How could these be things? If it was premeditated, we know that would be something wrong. But it's something that happens at the moment, and we give in. And it's not our. We don't have a high hand. We know that's wrong.
And you go home and you consider it and you realize I did my brother wrong. I have to fix that.
That's right. Or maybe some brother comes to you and said, you did me wrong, and you're not callous. You say, yeah.
And you're not aware of it, then you make that right.
That's right. Because he had to be made known. So that's your point. Yes, sir? Okay, so let's deal what we've looked at. How long did it take him to know he did wrong? And what did it take? I'll meditate on that, or did Jesus look at him? And he's already been told, you're going to deny me. And yet he did it. What? The passion of the moment gave in to that. And I think he knows he's doing wrong. But he did that to save his life. And when he sees Jesus, it just shows you how wrong it is. So there's a great example of maybe this time frame that we're looking at. It's not long, but sometimes people might not know the price of something, and somebody else was bargaining for them, and that was cheating, and you find out about it, and you don't stay there and say, well, I didn't know about it, but too bad. No, you change. And there was the sacrifice that was offered. So it's difficult for me to look at these things of cheating my neighbor out of money when you might not have known you cheated them out of money. I thought the bill was $800. I didn't know it was just $3. And you took their money. You don't keep it, but you find out that you had kept it and you spent it. Well, you're going to make good on that. And in law, you're going to put 20% to it. That to pay, to restore them and put them back in the right place before you did your ignorant thing. You did your inadvertent sin, so to speak. And to me, that's what we're dealing with here. There's so many regulations. They might not be aware of this. It might not be aware that that's a dead body, that's a dead carcass, or thinking I touched them because that's what I do with my family. And then you realize I've done that. To be ceremoniously clean, you had to offer sacrifice. It wasn't tick-a-lock, okay, I didn't mean to do that, so everything's clear. They would offer the sacrifices there. And when I've wronged somebody, we were to pay back that restitution, and that deals with what Dan was talking about. But it wasn't the idea that I'll just stay ignorant even when somebody tells me that and we'll let it go. That's another thing altogether. But I just want us to see and to work a little bit how this could happen. And you bring up so many things that could be inadvertent that would add to what I had to say, which is good. But some of this on the surface said, how in the world you could ever do that inadvertently? I don't understand it. Well, I hope we understand a little bit. All right, any other comments you want to make or questions?
I was going to say, at the grocery store, we get our change off and we just stick it in our pocket without checking to make sure it's right. And they get some more change pressure. I mean, that's cheating them out of money inadvertently. If you realized it, you would have given them back what you should have had.
Okay, you're on vacation and you're 70 miles away. And you find your kids got 3 quarts of pop and he stole. What do? Drive back? Well, okay. But, today we say, hey, I did this, I'll pay back money, I don't have to drive back. Sometimes you might drive back. That'd be a great lesson for somebody before he gets his beating. We're driving back, and you're going in there, and you're going to bring those 4-quart bottles back to them, or that candy bar. It may just be a candy bar. But you find out that wasn't yours, so you teach your children a lesson, and you show that's what it means to be honest, even when it's difficult to pay back. And here, I think, was the idea of that restitution was that area where you're not only admitting the wrong, I'm putting you better off than you were before. And that's what we're doing. Thank you. All right. Appreciate the discussion. Lesson 3. Why do you think when the priest sins, it's not said of him that his sin was made known to him before he offered his sacrifice? Doesn't mean it didn't happen, but it's interesting when all the other people are involved that the priest, it doesn't say that. Could there be a reason why? We'll discuss that. And that you got a long time. You got a week after the meeting. Our meeting starts next week. Thank you.